I believe that preparation is one of the best tools that you have to race the marathon well. So my goal in this video is to share the most common pacing mistakes so that you won't do them yourself and you can pace your way to your very best marathon. So the first mistake is pacing for an unrealistic finish time. Now, wanting a certain finish time in the marathon and being ready for that same time are two different things. And even if an online calculator says that you have the potential to run this specific time in the marathon, doesn't necessarily mean that you are ready to do that race time right now. This is very dependent on what your training looked like leading up to that marathon. And from one person to the next, that training can look very, very different. So I've shared a video about how you can utilize these calculators to find your goal pace for certain races, and I think that they're really, really valuable. The thing to understand is that the marathon distance specifically is a pretty big outlier from the shorter distances, and there are just a lot more variables involved that can affect the outcome. So it may say that your 5K time that you've raced gives you the potential to run, for example, a 4-hour marathon. But if you've been really inconsistent in training, maybe you haven't run more than 40 miles per week, maybe this is your first marathon, so you don't have any experience, those things can all lead to likely a slower time than what's actually predicted for you. So essentially, if you are pacing for an unrealistic finish time, it's going to backfire later on in the marathon. So what is the solution to this? I find that padding that time that those calculators give you, if you are on the lesser side of mileage or if this is your first marathon, padding that time by 10 minutes makes a lot of sense and is a lot more realistic. So it's much better if you can pace to that time plus about 10 minutes. And if you do find later on in the marathon that it's feeling too easy, you have the option to adjust and go for that faster time. But you would rather pace for a more realistic time and have a strong finish than have the opposite effect of where you are just slogging to the end. That's not fun. The second mistake is ignoring your race plan. So having a race plan put together ahead of time is crucial to success. What you have to remember is that since this is being done ahead of time, it is being created with a clear and thoughtful mind, whether that is by you or by your coach or both of you together. So letting your emotions or ego get the best of you on race day to the point where you're just throwing out your race plan is a bad idea. So the simple solution to this is run your own race, practice self-control, and stick to your plan. So the third pacing mistake is one of the worst things that you could do in the marathon, and that is going out too fast. So this is typically attributed to one of two things. Firstly, we get very excited on race day. That's really normal. The adrenaline is pumping. There's a lot of nervous energy around you. It's palpable. And when you start the race, that essentially is propelling you forward, making that faster pace feel even easier than it would at any other time. So feeling amazing can be mistaken for you are ready for a faster finish time than you had planned for. Maybe suddenly that 4:10 that you had planned for becomes a 4-hour and you think that you can do it. And so you start pacing for that when that was never part of your race plan. So here's a tip. You are supposed to feel amazing at the start of a marathon. You are the fittest you've ever been, hopefully. You had a great taper, hopefully. And so when you are on that start line, you should feel amazing. You should feel great. But the way that you feel at mile 1 is not the way that you're going to feel at mile 25. And so you need to make sure that you are holding back and not letting that excitement and that amazing feeling get the best of you in the moment. Because if you do, starting at a pace that you cannot sustain over the course of the entire marathon, it's going to make for a very grueling ending getting to the finish line, and we don't want that for you. So the major solution here is to start out about 10 to 15 seconds slower than your projected marathon pace. And that's per mile. Obviously, it's going to be adjusted if you are going by per kilometer. But the most important thing to note here is that if you even go a little bit slower than that, That's okay. The marathon is a really long distance. It's going to take you a long time to get from start to finish, and a lot can happen in those miles. So if you're feeling great later, you will have the opportunity to bump up that time and make up the time lost. The best way to run a marathon is to negative split. I have a whole other video devoted to this topic of how to pace a marathon, how to start, how to go through the middle. So I recommend that you watch that. But if you don't do anything else, please listen to this. And that is start conservatively. If you do that, it will allow you to finish strong. The fourth pacing mistake that I want to talk about is not adjusting for the terrain and the conditions of your marathon. So first, let's talk about races with hills. You need to make sure that you are running these by effort. So anytime that you get to a hill, you are adjusting your pace based on effort. You don't want to just try to rigidly maintain the same pace throughout a hilly course, or you're going to use up precious energy trying to fight gravity going up those hills. As soon as you go up a hill, you are going to notice that your perceived exertion immediately goes up if you are trying to hold the same pace that you were holding on the flats. So make sure that you listen to your body, go by effort, and slow down going up those hills. That will allow you to go faster on the downs and on the flats and have more energy to do so and have more energy at the end. I promise the people that are trying to fly up those hills are going to run out of gas long before you do. So the next part of this is adjusting for weather as you need to if you see that the conditions are not ideal. So really, when we're talking about ideal conditions, it's probably anything below 60 degrees, maybe cloudy, partly cloudy, light rain. Those can all be good things. Anything where we start creeping up into the 60s, it's full sun, lots of humidity. Those are times that you want to start considering adjusting your initial race strategy. And this doesn't mean that you're throwing out your race plan. In fact, this probably should be in your race plan ahead of time. You're looking at the weather as you're going into the race. And as much as it stinks to adjust your pacing strategy for hot, humid, windy conditions, you really have to. And trust me, I know I've been there, but I also understood in the moment that if I didn't make adjustments early on, then it was going to be really bad for me later on. So in some situations like that, you're going to have to give up that big, hairy goal probably in order to get the best outcome on the day. So the solution here, guys, is trust yourself and that inner voice. If it's telling you, hey, it's pretty warm out here, it feels kind of uncomfortable already, and you're only at mile 4, you need to listen and adjust. Which leads us into the fifth mistake, and that mistake is failing to listen to your body when it is giving you clear signals. So no matter how well you plan ahead of time, the marathon can bring the unexpected. You guys have probably heard the saying, the marathon owes you nothing. And that's simply because of what can occur over the course of that time and distance within your body that is really often impossible to plan for. With it being a tough distance, your planned pacing might become really challenging early on, way earlier than you expect it to. And what you don't want to find yourself doing is ignoring those signs that your body is giving you that it is a struggle. And now I'm not saying that just one bad mile means that you have to completely throw out your plan and adjust everything, because sometimes in the next mile you can feel that much better. But if maintaining your planned pace continues to be a struggle, it's important that you pull back sooner rather than later. Ignoring the signs and failing to adjust at the right time is a surefire way to hit the wall in the marathon. And that's basically where you have nothing left to give in those last 6 to 8 miles. It's a slog to the finish. You don't want to land yourself there. If you make the proper adjustments at the right time, a lot of times you are able to course correct and get back on track later on to your goal, or just not lose nearly as much of time as you would have if you would have ignored those signs. So sometimes it's just a matter of pulling back by 10 seconds per mile. Maybe it's not a huge change, but just enough to where your body says, okay, this feels much more comfortable and I know I can do this for a long time. Number 6 is blindly trusting a pacer. Now I want to say, first of all, thank you to pacers for doing what you do. I know that it's a hard job, and so I'm very appreciative of pacers being there for the marathon because it can offer great service to runners in the right circumstances. But in theory, it can often sound like a smart idea to run with the pacer when there are many times the runner hasn't actually thought through this plan ahead of time at all. In fact, it was never part of their race plan. And suddenly on race morning, they see a pacer with a sign and they think, oh, I'm gonna run with that pacer, when they actually have no clue what that pacer is going to be doing, how they're going to approach the race. Because the truth is that every pacer is going to approach the course differently, or they've been trained in a different way. And so you don't actually know how they're going to pace the course and if that aligns with what your plan was in the first place. And unfortunately, I've heard way too many stories about pacers starting way too fast for what they are supposed to be doing. So for example, a 4-hour marathon equals a 9:09. If they are going out at a 9-minute pace, that's too fast. They should not be going out at all faster than what the even pace strategy would be. And I don't even believe in typically doing an even pace strategy, which is why I'm saying you want to be really careful about choosing to run with a pacer. So I do understand the camaraderie and strength in numbers that can help a person get through a marathon. The problem that I see too often is that someone starts with too fast of a pace group, and by the middle of the marathon, that person can't stay with the pace group any longer. The pace group goes off, and in the hardest moments of your marathon, you are then stuck with no one to be with. And so just keep that in mind, that that is a possibility. Just because you're running with a group doesn't mean that your body's going to be ready to stay with them. So what is the solution here? The solution can either be don't run with a pacer at all, just run your own race, stick to your own plan. You're gonna be okay. Oftentimes it's just better if you do your own thing. But if you truly want to be able to run with a pace group, it's really important that you talk to the pacer ahead of time and ask them what their strategy is going to be. So if they say they're going to have a conservative start, then that's great. That's probably what you want to do too. And sometimes you can talk to them at the expo and get this information ahead of time as well, which is probably better than waiting till race morning. The other part of this is I typically recommend that my runners who want to run with a pace group start with the pace group behind their goal time. So if you were going for the 4-hour marathon, you start with the 4:10 pace group instead. This is going to make sure that you don't start out too fast, because you're going to be pacing essentially for a 4:10 marathon, but you're going to get that conservative start. And then later on, when you know that you're ready to pick it up, you can leave that group slowly, and then you're running the rest of your race on your own. And it's fun to kind of start with the group, and early on, you don't want to be using too much brain energy anyway, so it can be a really great way to just have that fun experience early on in the race, not get too caught up in the racing yet, and then you can pick up the pace and still be on target for your goal time that you're going for. So I hope you found value in this video. Pacing the marathon can be really tough, but it's a really important skill to master. And if you take the time to plan ahead and adjust accordingly on the day to how you are feeling, you can still have an amazing race. Go out there, guys. I know you're going to crush it, and I'll talk to you in the next one.